Carl Jung, Beyond the Mind, The Middle Path in the Psyche. Understanding the Human Soul, the Art of Creation, and the Impulse to Understand with Buddhist and Jungian Lenses. Imagine that our mind has two main paths for dealing with the ideas and feelings that arise from within us, especially those that come from our unconscious. One path is that of aesthetic formulation, or artistic, and the other is that of intuitive understanding, or intellectual. Both are natural and fundamental to our development, but each has its own particularities, beauties, and, of course, dangers. Carl Jung theories, which explore the depths of the human psyche, find fascinating echoes in various Buddhist practices and philosophies, especially regarding these two paths. Aesthetic formulation is when we focus on expressing something in a beautiful, organized, or artistic way. Think of a painter who decides to depict a dream. They might focus on the colors, shapes, and composition of the image, seeking to create something visually striking, even if the meaning behind the dream is not entirely clear to them. In writing, a poet who writes a beautiful poem, full of metaphors and rhythm, without necessarily having a logical or clear message in mind. The value lies in the sound of the words, the image they evoke, the emotion they convey. In Buddhism, this can be seen in Zen art, such as Japanese calligraphy, shodo, or ink painting, sumie, where the focus is on the act of creation itself, on full presence and the spontaneous beauty of the line, which reflects the artist's state of mind at the time. Perfection is not the ultimate goal, but the expression of impermanence and the interconnectedness of everything. In music, a musician who composes a complex and moving melody. Beauty lies in the harmony, the rhythm, the way the sounds intertwine, irrespective of whether there is an explicit story or meaning behind the music. In Buddhism, mantras and chants serve an aesthetic and meditative purpose. Its beauty resonates in the body and mind not only through the meaning of the words, but through the vibration and rhythm that induce altered states of consciousness, purifying the mind and cultivating devotion. In everyday life, someone who impeccably tidies their house, seeking visual harmony, order, and aesthetics, without delving into the reason each object is there. Pleasure lies in the beauty of organization. In Buddhism, preparing a Zen garden or arranging an altar is an act of meditation in motion, where mindfulness of form and the arrangement of elements becomes a spiritual practice, reflecting internal order and the search for clarity. The dangers of aesthetics. The problem arises when we fixate too much on the shell, the formal aspect. It's as if a painter were so concerned with creating the perfect painting that he forgot what the dream truly represented to him. Psychic energy, what Carl Jung called libido, should propel us toward growth and the transcendent function, which we will see later, but ends up being diverted to purely aesthetic problems. We end up overvaluing art for art's sake, losing connection with deeper meaning. From a Buddhist perspective, this aligns with the concept of attachment to phenomena or to form devoid of meaning. If external beauty becomes an end in itself without leading to a deeper understanding of reality, it can be a source of suffering, as it is inherently impermanent. Overvaluing the formal can generate an inflated aesthetic ego, which seeks external recognition and validation, rather than turning to internal liberation. Intuitive understanding, on the other hand, seeks the meaning of things. It's as if instead of painting a dream, you tried to analyze it, decipher it, and understand what each element means for your life. This search for meaning stems from weak and mere indications, that is, from insights, feelings, and associations that may not be fully formulated. Someone who, upon having a strange dream, spends hours pondering what it could mean, trying to connect symbols and situations with their waking life, searching for a why. In Buddhism, contemplation on impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta, is a practice of intuitive understanding. It is not merely an intellectual concept, but a profound experience and insight into the nature of reality and existence. A patient who, reporting a feeling of anxiety, tries, with the help of a therapist, to unravel the roots of that feeling, the past experiences that gave rise to it, and the current causes that maintain it. In Buddhism, the analysis of dependent arising, pratyuta samutpada, which examines the causes and conditions of suffering and existence, is a form of profound understanding that aims for liberation. The practice of vipassana meditation seeks this mental clarity through penetrating observation of present experience, revealing the true causes of suffering. A person who, when reading a complex book, is not satisfied with merely superficial reading. It seeks to understand the author's intentions, the subtext, the connections with other works and the world. In Buddhism, the study of sutras and teachings is not merely intellectual, but a search for an understanding that transforms the mind and heart. Wisdom, prajna, one of the three pillars of the Noble Eightfold Path, is this intuitive and direct understanding of reality. The dangers of understanding. The risk here is the opposite, overvaluing the content, the intellectual interpretation, the rational analysis, to the point of losing the symbolic and experiential character of what you are trying to understand. It's as if by overanalyzing the dream, you transformed it into a logical problem to be solved. You forget that it is a living experience, full of layers of meaning. The object becomes a mere cold concept. In Buddhism, this resembles the attachment to visions and conceptualizations. If we cling excessively to our interpretations and intellectual truths, we can become rigid and dogmatic, losing flexibility and the ability to experience reality directly. Wisdom becomes mere bookish knowledge, lacking the experience that leads to liberation. It's crucial to understand that none of these tendencies arise from an arbitrary choice, as if we could simply decide to be more artistic or more intellectual. They are the fruit of our personal nature, our deepest personality. But both can lead us into serious deviations. There may be times when we undervalue something that comes from the unconscious, thinking it's worthless because it doesn't fit collective standards. Imagine you have an idea of art that's very different from what's popular. If you dismiss it because nobody will like it, you're falling into this danger. On the other hand, we can also naively overvalue our own creations or insights, believing them to be brilliant, lacking any critical sense and seeking external approval. In Buddhism, personal character can be understood through the concept of karma and the habitual tendencies, or vasanas, we accumulate throughout our lives. These tendencies shape our inclinations, whether toward creative expression or intellectual pursuit. The danger of undervaluing or overvaluing is connected to ego attachment and the search for external validation, which are sources of suffering. When we devalue something that emerges from us because it doesn't fit collective standards, it's as if we submitted to ignorance or avidya of our own inner truth, seeking conformity. When we naively overvalue, we inflate the ego, creating more attachment and future dissatisfaction. In the process of psychic development, it is common for overvaluation on one side to lead to undervaluation on the other, and vice versa. Example: an artist who has always valued perfect form may, at a certain point in life, feel that their art lacks depth. They may then devalue everything they have done and obsessively seek meaning. Or someone who has always sought only meaning may feel frustrated at being unable to express their ideas in an engaging way and begin to overvalue aesthetics. These pendular movements are normal. The error lies in the lack of autonomy and unconsciousness, which lead us to judge based solely on collective values, what is considered good or beautiful by society, or at the opposite extreme, to an ego inflation, where we feel so special that we lose the ability to judge anything critically. Buddhism, particularly the concept of the middle way, offers profound wisdom for dealing with these extremes. The middle way is not a mere median, but an understanding that transcends opposites, avoiding the extremes of self-indulgence, overvaluation of form without meaning, and rigid asceticism, overvaluation of intellect without experience. The pursuit of wisdom, prajna, involves the ability to see reality without distortions, free from attachments to extremes. Full awareness, sati, and mindfulness allow us to observe these pendular movements without identifying with them, recognizing that overvaluation or undervaluation are merely passing mental phenomena, not our essence. The good news is that these two paths are not enemies. In fact, they are like two sides of the same coin, complementing each other and acting as regulating principles for each other. This interaction and synthesis of opposites is what Jung called the transcendent function. Aesthetic formulation requires an understanding of the meaning of the material to avoid being empty. Understanding requires aesthetic formulation to manifest clearly and perceptibly. Think of it this way. An architect can't simply create beautiful designs, aesthetics, without understanding the building's function, meaning. And they can't simply have a brilliant idea, meaning, without being able to represent it in a design, aesthetics. They complement each other so that the building is both functional and beautiful. In Buddhism, the union of wisdom, prajna, and compassion, karuna, is a clear example of the transcendent function. Wisdom gives us understanding of reality, but it is compassion, a form of expression and action, that drives us to act for the benefit of all beings. Another example is the integration of samatha, mental tranquility, and vipassana, penetrating vision, in meditation. One calms the mind, allowing the other to penetrate reality. This union leads to liberation and awakening. When we begin to explore the unconscious, the first step is to let it manifest as it wishes. This means that consciousness needs to let its guard down and allow casual and spontaneous ideas and associations to arise. Free writing, sitting down and writing whatever comes to mind without censorship or judgment, without worrying about logic or form. In Buddhism, this resembles the practice of beginner's mind, Shoshin, in Zen, where one approaches each moment without expectations or preconceptions, allowing reality to reveal itself as it is. Spontaneous drawing, taking a pencil and paper and drawing whatever comes to mind without a specific goal, letting one's hands guide. The mandala, in both Jungian psychology and Tibetan Buddhism, is a symbol of the self and the cosmos. Creating or contemplating mandalas is a way to allow the unconscious to express and organize itself, revealing internal patterns. Dreams. Observing dreams without trying to interpret them immediately, simply recording them and feeling the emotions they evoke. Tibetan Buddhism has dream yoga practices, where one seeks lucidity within the dream to explore the nature of the mind and reality, recognizing the impermanence and illusory nature of phenomena. This phase can be somewhat uncomfortable because it involves a step back from the conscious perspective. The unconscious often brings us things that seem irrational, undesirable, or unexpected. This is why we often tend to ignore or repress these contents. In Buddhism, the practice of meditation teaches us to observe these arising mental contents, thoughts, emotions, sensations, without judgment, allowing them to come and go. This equanimity, upekkha, is crucial to not cling to or reject what arises from the unconscious, whether good or bad. However, it is important to remember that even contents that do not have a collective value, that is, that society does not consider important, can have immense value to the individual. The intensity of the emotion we feel toward them, whether positive or negative, is a sign of their importance. This is where the one-sidedness of consciousness, our rational, habitual way of thinking, encounters resistance from our instincts and deepest emotions. In Buddhism, we recognize that all experiences, whether pleasant or unpleasant, are opportunities for awakening, for deepening our understanding of the nature of the mind and reality. The two paths, aesthetic and intellectual, separate when one of them becomes dominant: the desire to create. You may be so focused on producing something, a song, a text, a drawing, that you end up worrying more about its form and less about its intrinsic meaning. The passion for creation takes hold of the object, but meaning takes a back seat. The desire to understand. Or, conversely, you may be so eager to understand something that you anticipate the need to express it adequately. The search for meaning supersedes formulation. Ideally, of course, these two aspects would coexist side by side or follow each other rhythmically. However, in practice, one often dominates the other. Buddhism warns against attachment to either of these extremes. Attachment to form can lead to vanity and pride, while attachment to content can generate dogmatism and mental rigidity. True freedom lies in not clinging to either, but in using them skillfully and in balance. The contents of the unconscious want, above all, to emerge clearly. This is only possible when we give them an adequate formulation. We can only judge and understand them when they become perceptible. This is why Freud, when working with dreams, asked patients to make free associations before interpreting them. He allowed dream contents to express themselves as they wished, rather than trying to fit them into a predefined scheme. In Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings are presented in a variety of forms, from elaborate sutras to Zen koans, all designed to make the truth clear and accessible, provoking insights and direct understanding. The symbolic language of Buddhism itself, with its images of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, mandalas, and mudras, serves as an aesthetic formulation for profound and inexpressible concepts. It is not enough to simply explain the content of a dream conceptually. Often it is necessary to make obscure contents visible. We can do this by drawing, painting, or modeling them. Drawing a nightmare. Rather than simply trying to understand what the nightmare means, drawing it can bring to light details, colors, and sensations that the conscious mind had forgotten, allowing for a deeper understanding. In Tibetan Buddhism, the creation of tankas, detailed religious paintings, and sand mandalas are complex practices that require great concentration and artistic discipline. They serve to visually manifest spiritual and archetypal concepts, making them tangible for meditation and understanding. Shaping a feeling. Someone who feels stuck might shape a sculpture that represents this feeling, and the physical act of shaping the material can release insights and emotions that words cannot express. In the deity yoga of Tantric Buddhism, the practitioner visualizes themselves as an enlightened deity. This mental shaping of oneself, which is a profound aesthetic and imaginative formulation, helps awaken latent qualities and integrate aspects of the self, transforming the perception of one's identity. Jung says that often the hands know how to solve riddles that the intellect has struggled in vain to understand. By shaping a dream or a feeling, it is as if we can continue to dream it or experience it in greater detail in the waking state. This allows an isolated and initially unintelligible event to be integrated into the whole personality, even if at first we are unaware of the entire process. This integration is similar to the Buddhist concept of unification of the mind, where fragmentations are resolved into a cohesive and conscious whole. Aesthetic formulation can lead the patient to imagine themselves as an artist and, naturally, misunderstood. They fixate on form and beauty but do not seek the essence. In Buddhism, this manifests in attachment to external beauty without delving deeper into emptiness. Buddhist art is a means to awakening, not an end in itself. On the other hand, the desire to understand meaning can begin with a superficial, casual association without a solid foundation of formulated material. This increases the risk that interpretation will be determined by theoretical or moral prejudices rather than empirical facts. It's like trying to fit a square into a circle just to get an answer. In Buddhism, this is dogmatism, where understanding becomes rigid and based on pre-existing concepts, preventing the true wisdom that arises from direct experience. Intellectual pursuit without a foundation in experience can lead to a conceptual mind that loses itself in abstractions rather than being rooted in reality. The hope of successful understanding is greater when starting from a previously formulated product, be it a drawing, a text, or any other expression. The less initial material formulated, the greater the risk that interpretation will be biased by our own preconceived ideas.
In Buddhism, this aligns with the importance of having a solid foundation of practice, sila and samadhi, before seeking deeper wisdom. Direct experience, meditative practice, grounds understanding, preventing it from being merely a conceptual sandcastle. Allowing the unconscious to guide the process is only legitimate when consciousness is in a critical situation, that is, when the ego feels disoriented or at an impasse. In these moments, the unconscious can offer new directions. In Buddhism, these moments of personal crisis, of doubt and dissatisfaction with samsara, the cycle of existence, are often seen as the catalyst for seeking the Dharma, the teachings. This is when the ego, with its limitations, recognizes the need for something greater. When we are able to formulate the unconscious content, give it form, and understand the meaning of this formulation, we enter the second and most important stage, the confrontation between the ego and the unconscious. It is in this confrontation of opposites, rational consciousness and the deep and sometimes irrational contents of the unconscious, that a third element emerges, the transcendent function. This is the synthesis, the new attitude, the transformation that results from the integration of these two worlds. At this stage, the process no longer rests solely with the unconscious. The ego assumes an active and conscious role in the elaboration and integration. In Buddhism, this transcendent function is the essence of bodhicitta, the awakening mind that aspires to enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. It arises from the integration of wisdom, which encompasses the unconscious and the nature of the mind, and compassion, which manifests in the conscious and transformative action of the ego. The ego, rather than being subjugated, becomes a vehicle for the manifestation of enlightenment, acting in a way more aligned with the true nature of reality. The journey is one of transformation of the mind through overcoming attachments and illusions, leading to a state of complete freedom and wisdom. In essence, this process teaches us to respect both form and content, art and intellect, as indispensable partners in the journey of self-discovery and growth. It is the dance between creation and understanding that leads us to a richer and more meaningful life, and, in the Buddhist context, to a profound release from suffering and spiritual awakening. Would you like to explore how any of these Buddhist practices can be applied to your own journey of self-discovery? Or perhaps delve deeper into how the concept of ego is viewed by both Jung and Buddhism.